I'm Dave TTC, and this is Dave's Cave. Today's episode is brought to you by Love You Dad. Okay, so what is today's episode? Today's episode is about me. Just so that for those of you who want to know, who is Dave TTC? What is TTC? Well, TTC is a few letters that I put on the end of my name for when I joined a number of woodworking forums around the world and across Australia. And it went to two things that I loved. One is the hat. I always wanted to be a cowboy. And just for the reference, no, I'm not bald. Some people thought because I was always in a hat that I was bald. So in Australia, we don't have cowboys. They're more roustabouts, but I always loved the idea of cowboys. I wanted to be a cowboy. The other thing I love, aside from woodwork, is wood turning. And so the turning cowboy was to do with the lathe. And then my tagline underneath Dave TTC was turning wood into art. So that's what Dave TTC is all about. Who is Dave today? Who is Dave today? Well, I'm a single dad with 3 children. If you've watched any of my previous episodes, particularly when I was trying to get woodworking with kids up and running, you will have met my 3 children who you'll see up there shortly. The one closest to me, Tyler, then Sammy, then Tommy. And this first part of the video is boring. And if you do watch it, sorry about the sound. I've learned a lot about video editing since then. You have to turn it up a bit. Excuse me. As a single dad, I like to ask for your help. Help how? No, I'm not going to ask for handouts. I'm not going to ask for you to send me money or anything like that. I've endeavoured to get this YouTube channel going. This is my 4th attempt, and I'm hoping this time it's going to work. Now, I identify as having Asperger's, as well as ADHD and OCD, and between all of those things, it's sometimes a fight and a struggle. I don't particularly do well on my own. I don't do well on my own, but that's not an excuse. I need to get on with things and get things done. And so how you can help me is by liking, subscribing. Please watch to the end of my videos. You know what? Even if you find them boring, if you just leave it playing in the background so I can clock up some YouTube hours, if you make a playlist every now and then and just go somewhere in the house and think, yeah, I'll just let him play, that's going to help me. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. I'm not sure what YouTube says about that. But anyway, I'd love it if you could watch the videos to the end, like and subscribe. Here's my kids. The first 2 came on. Tom was really shy back then, and it wasn't towards the end that they came on. And if you watch this video to the end, the kids are a bit cute. I was a bit, they're not behaving. I don't know if you can see it on my face, but in reality, the kids were absolutely the best thing about that video. Yeah, they were good. All right, so me, single dad, I've been married twice. I never had children with my first wife, and I should have worked harder to keep that marriage. I don't regret having kids. I love my kids. But looking back, I blamed her for a couple of things, and really speaking, I should have listened. I should have been more attentive in certain respects. I wasn't abusive. There wasn't any of that sort of stuff. I just failed to recognise some things, perhaps a little bit of pride, and I thought if I could cope, she could cope. That's a mistake. There's no undoing the past. Second wife, again, maybe I thought a bit too much about my own abilities and thought if I could cope, she could cope. And again, if I'm honest, I didn't listen to her. So anyway, we were separated at this point, which was 6.5 years ago. I think we separated in 2014, 2015, I can't remember exactly what year it was. Tried to make things work even though we lived in separate places. She lived there, I lived here, and I was hoping things were going to work out, but eventually it got to the stage I knew it wasn't. She's since remarried. I'm happy for her. She seems to be doing well. She lives, I've lost track how far it is. It's 5 or 6 hours away. I have my kids 50-50. And so obviously they're not going to be spending 2 days here, 3 days there, whatever. So as a result, it's turned into a 2 week on, 2 week off, or sometimes it might be 4 or 5 weeks, depending on circumstances. But in the early days, it was 2 weeks, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off with each of us. And so we'd meet at the border. She lives in one state, I live in another state. We'd often meet in the border. And that's been going on for 5 or 6 years, I think. When she lived there, that was only 60 kilometres up there, or 50 kilometres up the road, so it wasn't too far away. But then she wanted to move back near family, and I didn't oppose that. But we agreed that we'd meet at the border or halfway, whichever was closest for me. Since then, I have an amicable relationship with her. She's remarried. She's got stepkids. She's got grandchildren from her first marriage. I've even had her husband and her come and stay with me and the kids here. And he's brought his kids and one of her grandchildren. They've been a couple of times. So we have a friendly relationship. I know there's some extreme circumstances out there, and when people split up, that's it. One just definitely doesn't want to see the other. But if there's no domestic violence involved, I think people should be able to be amicable. All right, so let's get out of the relationship side of things. Yes, I've had a couple of relationships since then. I'm single. There was one of my previous girlfriends who I felt I was particularly compatible with on many levels. I would love to have settled down with her, but she didn't want to settle down. She was a free spirit and just didn't want to get into a live together relationship or marriage or any of that sort of stuff. I'm a bit old fashioned. One day I would like to be in another relationship. One day I'd like to marry. And it seems the ones that I meet in life that, at least on some levels, appear most compatible are the ones that don't want to settle down. So such is life. Going into my childhood, I grew up in a disadvantaged environment. When my mum and dad were first together, they were generation whatever they are, family boomers, I think they were. I'm not sure. I think they were boomers. I haven't really kept up with all of that stuff. But they had a three bedroom, 1 bathroom house. It was a nice house. They were buying it, but they had problems. It was a very on again, off again relationship. My mum had mental health issues. My dad possibly did as well. I don't know. I would say that they were both significantly on the spectrum, and they were definitely, sadly, a bad match for each other. They just triggered each other, and it was not a good environment. I typically choose to remember the good things as opposed to the bad things. So I try to learn from their good examples as opposed to their bad examples. From age 5, they were continually splitting up and getting together again. I don't recall what happened prior to that. I changed primary school at least 16 times. I think one primary school I actually returned to 3 times. I had my school records once. And so they'd split up, change schools, get back together, maybe go back to school or maybe back to the same school, or they might have moved somewhere else to make a fresh start and it'd be a new school. By the time I was 9, they were divorced, and that was it. I almost stopped seeing my dad until I was 13. Then I saw him for a little while until he was killed by a truck driver who was on uppers and downers and apparently didn't even remember hitting my dad's. My dad was in a truck. He was a shared driver, furniture van or truck, Pantech. A semi-trailer just went straight through it, hit and run, Gawler bypass in Adelaide. And he stopped, picked up his toolbox on the side of the road, put it back on the semi. This truck my dad was in was just like obliterated. The Pantech was ripped off the back of the truck, furniture all over the road. How the semi went straight through that, I don't know. He went through a stop sign doing 110 or over 110 according to the police report, I believe it was, which is something like 70 mile an hour, getting close to that. I think in America you call semis 18-wheelers. Police came, asked me to identify the body, but my mum couldn't wake me from my sleep, so that never happened. So from then on, I was definitely in a single-parent family. My mum, for my entire life, except for when she was with my dad, was on welfare benefits, so we had nothing. I had one new bike when I was about 5 or 6, I think, when mum and dad were together. Dad had a job, he worked. And then I didn't have a bike again until I was about 10. That was a second-hand bike, weighed a ton. It was so heavy. There was a guy down the street who used to go to the tip and salvage bits and pieces and make bikes, paint them up, resell them. And so it was a fresh coat of paint. And I never had a new bike all my life until I got married, bought one for myself. It was always second-hand bikes, wheeling and dealing and finding bits and pieces lying around, making my own bikes, repairing my own bikes. My mum had what they called back in those days manic depression, now called bipolar. So on top of the splitting up, getting together, right through my life, she would end up in psychiatric wards because of her mental condition. And so then I would, when mum left dad, I'd go with her. We should go in hospital. She would try to conceal us from my dad, and so I'd end up a ward of the state or with other friends and relatives. And, all of this contributed to what some might call a very unstable childhood. I still seem to do well. I did well at school. I was always picked on at school, and I put it down to a religious upbringing. But the thing is, I never felt like I was part of it within the religion either. Like when I say part of it, I felt the odd one out. It was inclusive. People looked out for me, but I just felt I was the odd one out. I sort of put that down to all sorts of things. But looking back, I put it down to autism spectrum disorder. I was different, and I struggled to fit in. Even today, I find it hard. ADHD, I can't begin to tell you how hard it is for me to follow a conversation sometimes. My mind just wanders. The amount of times I sabotage a conversation, take over a conversation. My first wife was really good. She helped me see that. Didn't know what the problem was in those days. Just knew I did it. And she would help me to try and get things back on track. She just had this little look she'd give me, and I thought, yep, I've done it again. And so I would try to return conversations to where they were. So my childhood, didn't have much new stuff. My mum, she wasn't good at housework. She wasn't good at cooking. She wasn't good at sewing. She tried to look out for us as best she could, but she was limited for mental health reasons, whatever it was. Demographically, there I was, a kid who was basically destined to go nowhere. Statistically, kids that grow up in that sort of situation never make a go of life. I got married, I got a job, I went straight into an apprenticeship out of school and never looked back. And I've been self-employed ever since. I've had a passion for woodwork since as young as I can remember. Used to get given toolkits from relatives and things from as young as I can remember. They weren't stunning toolkits, it was a junior hacksaw, that little metal one with a little tiny blade on it. Hammers that if you went to pull out a nail or knock a 3-inch nail in, 75mm, 70mm nail in, you'd snap the dowel handle because it just wasn't built for it. But I made the most of it and I loved it. I could tell you a story about when I was a kid. One place we lived in, the house where we were when Dad died. Obviously, he didn't live with us. There was a whole row of trees down the driveway. They were like poplars, but a bit thinner. I think it was about 12 or 13 trees, and they used to get into the sewer line all the time, and Mum wanted rid of them. So that was one of my jobs. So I took out these trees, and I used a claw hammer. I had the claw, and I just hooked it into the trunk and just ripped out bits of tree until it was enough that I could snap it off. And I did that with 12 trees. There was one tree that was significantly bigger than the rest. I'm thinking back then, I was probably 12 at the most. I think I was still in primary school. And there was one tree which had a diameter on it, about 300mm across or a foot. With a claw hammer, and I'd been going all day, and now it was getting close to sunset. It was in the summer, and I'd chipped away at this tree and whittled it down a bit like what are those things you have in America, beaver or something that eats away at trees. I sort of attacked it from all sides, but I was just running out of daylight, and I was running out of strength and stamina. And so I went and saw the neighbour and said, have you got some ropes? I need to tie this tree up. I'm afraid it's going to fall down overnight. Then it suddenly occurred to me we had a handsaw. So anyway, I went inside, got the handsaw, down she went, and that was the trees down. Not exactly woodwork, it was more wood demolition, but I was making things, from young age right through to older in life. Because of my upbringing, it gave me a soft spot for single mums and for kids without dads. I knew what it was like to not have a dad. I knew what it was like to not be able to see your dad or for him to be completely out of the picture. I also knew what it was like to grow up financially hamstrung, not having much at all, not being able to afford things. And later in life, by the time I had my kids, I started having workshops here in Doon, and even when I lived in Jerilderie, I had some workshops there. Back then, I didn't have the kid aspect involved. It was just other people. I had this desire to be able to provide things for free or without cost, without charge. And so I'd just have a donation tin. And I'd have a woodworking weekend where we'd all have an interchange. We'd do woodworking, we'd have demos, we'd have barbecues. And I wasn't rich. I never have been rich. But I would just provide it at no cost. I would have a barbecue, I'd have drinks. If people wanted alcohol, they had to bring their own. I discouraged over drinking because obviously we're around tools. But I'd have tea, coffee, juice, soft drink, that sort of stuff. And I just have a little donation tin, a little bit like the cup. I said, look, if you want to put a donation in, it's over there. I don't need to know about it. I don't need to know who does or who doesn't. Some people wanted to be known and they would, put money in my pocket, so to speak. And I always found that I came close to covering costs. I'd always be within, $50 probably of covering costs. That was worth it. That was a great thing. And so then when I moved here, even though I was separated from my ex, she would come down and help with these get-togethers I'd have. And a lot of people didn't even know that we were officially separated. They just thought I was doing up this house and she was living up there till it was done up. She'd come down here, she'd help. And then I started to include homeschool kids. I'd have this long weekend, which would be 3 or 4 days. And so I'd have one day for homeschoolers. And all these different activities, had volunteer woodworkers from around the country who would come. And, it was our social weekend, but we'd have one day where we'd put on stuff for the kids. and different ones would do different projects with the kids, and whoever turned up, they could do this project and there was no charge. They donated their time, they donated materials, and I donated the food. And again, if they wanted to put in something towards food, they could, but there was no expectation because I wanted it to be an inclusive environment. I didn't want kids missing out because they couldn't afford it. And come through to today, my YouTube channel, I like to share. I like to share knowledge. I like to share how to do things. So on my YouTube channel, it's something this is the 4th time I've tried to get it up and running. I'm asking for your help. Like, subscribe, share, watch it to the end. I want to get this channel going. What's the history of my channel? I first tried to get this up and going about 11 and a half years ago. And I'll drop a link down below to that first video, which was the Centre Saver pen mandrel review. It was a wood turning video. It was done at a friend's place, 50 kilometres north of here, in his backyard, just on a stand under a tree. It was summer. Oh well, it was late spring. It was a warm day, and we made that video there, uploaded it. Did a couple of videos, and everything sort of fell flat for a while. But I had this desire to share and have a YouTube channel, and the goal was eventually to have it monetized so that I could make some money off it. I don't want to get rich. I just want to be able to live, feed my kids, and enjoy doing what I love. So about 6.5 years ago, you saw the kids up there a little bit earlier, I started the main focus of my channel, which was going to be woodworking with kids. There was 3 streams to the channel in those days. It was woodworking with kids, woodwork and wood turning, and DIY. So I tried that back in whenever it was, 6.5 years ago, 16, I think it was 2016, not long after my baby brother died of cancer. Got it going for a few episodes. Asperger's, ADHD, OCD, all kicked in together, and life in general. It came to a bit of a halt. I had a couple of little attempts to, chuck one in here, chuck one in there, but wasn't really having the regular content. Fast forward to a bit over a year and a half ago. By this time I'd started laser engraving, but I wasn't sharing anything with people yet. I was focusing on getting into markets, and so I had a series of markets, a series of videos. I think it was the 11-day market challenge, and I'll drop a link to the first one in that series down below as well. And I was trying to set up a mini one-man workshop where I could get into production mode and turn stuff out for markets. I'm still doing markets today as well as construction. Fast forward to this year, January, I'm starting again, and at the moment my primary focus is the lasers, CNC lasers, laser engraving, laser cutting, that sort of stuff. And so I'm going to have 4 streams, and I'm probably going to have them color coded. Black and white at the top and bottom will be the laser, and then I'll have different ones for the other 3 streams. So there'll be laser engraving as one main subject. There'll be DIY and tool reviews as another subject. There'll be woodworking with kids and homeschooling related stuff as another subject, and woodworking and wood turning as another subject. So that'll be my 4 main categories, and I'll try to have them, in my thumbnail color coded with a band across the top and bottom, so that visually you can see what it is. And if you're only after one thing, well, okay, I'm only going to watch the laser stuff because that's the black and white, or you're more interested in the kids, and so you'll watch that. That's pretty much it, I think. That's a little bit of history about me, a little bit of history about the channel and what I want to do. There will be links to some videos down below, as I've mentioned. By all means, feel free to like, subscribe, share, watch those various videos, and I'll have a link to this video probably in most of my future videos, so that when people are watching for the first time, they can think, oh, who is this guy? I'm Dave TTC, and this is Dave's Cave.